Jake Reed was having a bad week, and it was only Tuesday. The cooling unit on Bay 3 had blown out again. Mrs. Patterson's cargo hauler needed a complete engine overhaul that she definitely couldn't afford. And now there was this beaten-up Velrati freighter leaking fuel all over his cleanest landing pad. Jake grabbed his toolkit and headed out, boots clanging on the metal walkway of Waystation Nova 9. The station wasn't much to look at, just another forgotten trading post on the edge of human space where the desperate and the running came to refuel and disappear. The Velrati captain was waiting by the ship's ramp. Tall, reptilian, with scales that shimmered green and blue under the station's harsh lights. Velrati always made Jake think of Earth's old dinosaur pictures, if dinosaurs had learned to fly spaceships and develop bad attitudes. "You the mechanic?" the captain asked. His translator collar rendered his hissing speech into flat, emotionless English. "That's what the sign says," Jake replied, already walking around the ship to assess the damage. "What happened here?" "Rough jump. Need it fixed fast." Jake ran his scanner over the hull. Plasma scoring, patched holes, and what looked like weapons fire across the port side. This wasn't rough navigation. This was someone running from something. Not his business. He fixed ships, collected payment, and kept his head down. "Give me 4 hours," Jake said. 3,000 credits. The captain, Jake caught his name as Vrek from the ship's registration, didn't even negotiate. He just transferred the credits and disappeared into the station's market district. That should have been Jake's first warning sign. He got to work, welding patches and rerouting damaged power conduits. It was mindless work, the kind he liked. No thinking required. Just his hands, the tools, and the hiss of the plasma torch. He was halfway through the job when he noticed something moving inside the cargo bay. Jake killed the torch and squinted into the darkness. "Hello?" Two large, golden eyes blinked at him from behind a storage crate. "You can come out," Jake said, keeping his voice calm. "I'm not gonna hurt you." Slowly, a small figure emerged. A Velrati child, maybe waist-high to Jake, with softer scales and those huge eyes that made him look perpetually worried. He was clutching a worn stuffed animal, some kind of earth toy, oddly enough. "Hey there, buddy," Jake said, crouching down. "Where's your dad?" The kid's translator was cheaper than his father's, crackling with static. "Daddy went to get supplies. He said to wait here." Jake glanced at his scanner. Vrek's credit transfer had come through 2 hours ago. Most captains stuck around during repairs, anxious about their ships. This one had dumped money and vanished. "You got a name?" Jake asked. "Pip." "All right, Pip. I'm Jake. Your dad know he left you on the ship?" Pip nodded seriously. "Daddy always comes back. He told me to wait." Something cold settled in Jake's stomach. He'd seen this before. Desperate people did desperate things, and kids always paid the price. "Tell you what," Jake said, standing up. "Why don't you wait in my workshop? It's warmer, and I've got better snacks." Pip followed him across the bay, small feet pattering on metal. Jake's workshop was cluttered but comfortable, heated, with a beat-up couch and a viewport showing the star field beyond the station. He found some ration bars that probably wouldn't poison Velrati biology and set Pip up on the couch. "You just hang tight. Your dad will probably be back soon." Pip nodded, already distracted by the ships visible through the viewport. Jake finished the repairs. 4 hours turned into 5, then 6. He kept glancing at the couch where Pip sat, unnaturally still, watching the stars. Vrek didn't come back. The station's lights cycled to night mode, dim to save power. Jake should have contacted station security, filed a report, gotten the kit processed through proper channels. Should have. Instead, he heated up 2 meals and brought one to Pip. "Your dad might be a while," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "You hungry?" Pip ate mechanically, still watching the viewport. When he finished, he moved to the window, pressing his small 3-fingered hand against the transparent aluminum. "What are you doing?" Jake asked. "Waiting for Daddy," Pip said simply. "He always comes back. He promised." The translator couldn't convey emotion, but Jake heard it anyway in the kid's voice. That absolute certainty. That faith. Jake had heard those words before, a lifetime ago, in a different voice. Before the universe had taught him that promises break and people leave. He grabbed a blanket and tossed it onto the couch. "You can sleep here tonight. Just tonight." But as he watched Pip curl up by the viewport, still watching, still waiting, Jake had a sinking feeling that one night was going to turn into something more. He just didn't know how much more. 1 day turned into 3. 3 turned into a week. Jake told himself it was temporary. Any day now, Vrek would show up with some excuse, and the kid would be gone. Back to his own life. Not Jake's problem anymore. Except Pip was kind of becoming his problem. The kid was everywhere. When Jake worked on the Patterson hauler, Pip sat on an overturned crate, watching with those huge golden eyes. When Jake ate breakfast, Pip appeared with his own ration bar, eating in companionable silence. When Jake tried to sleep, he'd wake up to find Pip had dragged his blanket closer to Jake's quarters, still within sight of that damn viewport. "You don't have to watch every night," Jake said one evening, more roughly than he intended. "Your dad knows where you are." "I know," Pip said quietly. "But what if he comes back and I'm not watching? What if he thinks I forgot about him?" Jake didn't have an answer for that. The second week, Jake made a mistake. A big one. Pip was underfoot while Jake worked on a freighter's landing gear, asking his usual stream of questions. Usually Jake grunted responses, but this time, maybe because he was tired, maybe because the kid's curiosity reminded him of someone he used to know, he actually explained. "See this hydraulic line? It controls the pressure for the landing struts. You get a leak here, the whole system fails." Pip leaned closer, studying the mechanism with unexpected focus. "Why doesn't it have a backup line?" Jake blinked. That was actually a good question. Cost. Backup systems mean extra weight, extra maintenance. Most captains skip them. "That's stupid," Pip said matter-of-factly. Jake surprised himself by laughing. "Yeah, kid. It really is." After that, Pip wasn't just watching anymore. He was learning. Jake found himself explaining things without meaning to. How plasma welders worked. Why you never cross certain power conduits. The difference between Earth-made components and Centauri knockoffs. Pip absorbed it all like a sponge, his small hands mimicking Jake's movements. Velrati children, Jake learned, had remarkable memories. Pip could watch a procedure once and repeat it perfectly. His three-fingered hands were smaller than Jake's but surprisingly deft, able to reach into tight spaces Jake's human fingers couldn't manage. "Hand me the torque wrench," Jake said one afternoon, not even thinking about it. Pip passed him the correct tool on the first try. They worked in silence for a while, and Jake realized with a start that it felt normal. Natural. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. The other station residents noticed. Mrs. Patterson cornered Jake at the market. "That Velrati boy still with you?" "Temporarily," Jake said, defensive. She raised an eyebrow. "It's been 2 weeks, Jake. That's not temporary. That's you avoiding the obvious." "His father's coming back." "Sure he is." Her voice was gentle, pitying. Jake hated it. Rodriguez from Bay 7 was less subtle. "You keeping that kid or what? Because if not, station authorities should know. There's procedures for abandoned." "He's not abandoned," Jake snapped. "His father's delayed. It happens." But Rodriguez's words stuck with him. That night, after Pip fell asleep on the couch, finally too exhausted to maintain his viewport vigil, Jake accessed the station's database. He told himself he was just checking. Just making sure everything was legitimate. What he found made his blood run cold. Vrek's ship registration was flagged. Not just flagged, marked with priority alerts from 3 different security services. The searches were cryptic, buried in code, but Jake had spent enough years in the colonial marines to read between the lines. Smuggling. Debt. And a name that made Jake's stomach drop, the Cross Syndicate. Everyone on the frontier knew about the Cross Syndicate. They ran guns, drugs, and anything else that turned a profit. They didn't forgive debts, and they definitely didn't forget. Jake dug deeper, hacking into shipping manifests and transaction records that he definitely didn't have clearance to access. The picture got worse with every file he opened. Vrek had been running contraband for the syndicate. A shipment had gone missing, whether Vrek stole it or lost it didn't matter. The syndicate wanted their money or their product. When Vrek couldn't pay, he'd run. The timestamps told the story. Vrek's last known location, Waystation Nova 9. His ship's departure, logged 3 hours after he'd paid for repairs, heading for the outer systems at maximum burn. No return course filed. No messages left. Nothing. He'd dumped his kid and run to save his own skin. Jake sat in the darkness of his workshop, listening to Pip's soft breathing from the couch. The kid still believed. Still waited every night, faithful as a saint. Jake had 2 choices. Contact station authorities, let them process Pip through the system. The kid would end up in some overcrowded refugee center, maybe get fostered out to a Velrati family if he was lucky. It was the right thing to do. The legal thing. Oh. Jake looked at the small figure curled under the blanket. At the worn stuffed animal clutched in those small hands. At the boy who'd started passing him tools without being asked, who listened to his explanations with such fierce concentration, who still believed his father was coming back. Jake had lost his own daughter 5 years ago. Cancer, fast and merciless. After that, he'd run, from Earth, from memories, from anything that required him to care about another living being. He'd told himself he was done. No more attachments. No more ways for the universe to hurt him. But here was this kid, abandoned and waiting, and Jake was already in too deep to walk away clean. Damn it, Jake muttered to the empty workshop. He didn't call station authorities that night. Or the next. He told himself he'd do it tomorrow. Tomorrow never quite came. 3 weeks in, Jake stopped pretending this was temporary. Pip had his own corner now. A real sleeping pad instead of the couch. A spare jumpsuit that Jake had modified to fit his smaller frame. A toolkit, child-sized wrenches and drivers that Jake had fabricated in the station's machine shop, though he'd never admit why he needed them. They had a routine. Mornings, Jake would heat up 2 breakfast rations. Pip would eat his while perched on the workbench, legs swinging, asking questions about whatever ship was in the bay. Afternoons were for work. Pip handed Jake tools now without being asked, anticipating what he'd need next. The kid was getting scary good at it. Evenings were harder. Pip still sat by the viewport as the station lights dimmed. Still watching the stars. Still waiting. Jake kept digging into Vrek's background, and every file he cracked open made him angrier. The Cross Syndicate wasn't just looking for Vrek anymore. They were actively hunting him. And Jake had found messages, encrypted, but not encrypted enough, that suggested the Syndicate knew about Pip. They thought the kid might be useful. Leverage, if Vrek ever surfaced. Or payment, if he didn't. The thought made Jake's hands shake. He was staring at those files when Rodriguez knocked on his workshop door. The older mechanic looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like he was delivering bad news. Got something you should know, Rodriguez said. 2 guys came through the station yesterday. Asking about a Velrati freighter. Asking about a kid. Jake's blood went cold. What did you tell them? Nothing. But Jake. Rodriguez glanced at Pip, who was absorbed in cleaning a spark plug across the room. This isn't sustainable. Whatever trouble that kid's father brought here, it's coming. You need to make this official, or you need to let him go. After Rodriguez left, Jake sat at his workbench, head in his hands. He'd been a coward, avoiding the decision by just letting days pass. But time was up. He could contact child services. Get Pip processed through official channels. The system would protect him, probably. Maybe. Or Jake could file adoption paperwork. Make this permanent. Put his own name in the system, attached to a kid the Cross Syndicate was looking for. Both options terrified him for different reasons. That evening, Pip broke the routine. Instead of going to the viewport, he climbed onto the workbench next to Jake. His small legs dangled, not quite reaching the floor. For a long moment, he just sat there, not speaking. Jake. His voice was smaller than usual. Yeah, buddy? Can I ask you something? Sure. Pip's golden eyes fixed on him, and Jake saw something in them he'd been dreading. The faith was cracking. The certainty was fading. Do you think? Pip started, then stopped. Started again. Do you think Daddy forgot about me? Jake's throat tightened. He could lie. Could feed the kid false hope for another day, another week. But Pip deserved better than that. Come here, Jake said, pulling up a second stool. They sat facing each other, eye to eye. I need to be honest with you. Can you handle that? Pip nodded, though his scales had gone pale. Your dad, he's not coming back, Pip. He's in trouble. Bad trouble. And he left you here because... Jake struggled with the words. Because he thought you'd slow him down. He watched Pip process this. Watched the hope drain from those huge eyes. Watched the kid's world crack apart. Did I do something wrong? Pip's voice broke. Was I bad? No. Jake grabbed the kid's shoulders, maybe too firmly. Listen to me. This isn't about you. Your dad made a choice. A coward's choice. But you? You didn't do anything wrong. Pip's face crumpled. Velrati didn't cry like humans, no tears, but the sound he made was unmistakably sobbing. His whole small body shook with it. Jake did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He pulled the kid into a hug. Pip clung to him, making those awful broken sounds, and Jake held on tight. His own eyes burned. All the walls he'd built, all the distance he'd maintained, it all came crashing down. "I know it hurts," Jake said quietly. "I know you wanted him to come back. But Pip, I'm not going anywhere." Pip pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "Promise." That word. That terrible, binding word. Jake had sworn he'd never make promises again. Promises were just future broken hearts. But looking at this kid, this brave, smart, abandoned kid who'd been waiting faithfully for a father who didn't deserve him, Jake couldn't help himself. "I promise. I'm staying right here." "What if Daddy does come back?" Pip asked. Jake thought about that. Thought about what he'd say to Vrek if the coward ever showed his face. "Then we'll deal with it together. But until then, you've got me. If you want me." Pip nodded against Jake's chest. They sat like that for a while, the workshop quiet except for the distant hum of the station's life support. Later, Jake would file the paperwork. Later, he'd figure out how to protect them both from the syndicate. Later, he'd worry about the future. Right now, he just held on to the kid who'd somehow cracked through all his defenses and reminded him what it meant to choose family. Not the family you're born with. The family you stay for. The adoption paperwork was halfway through processing when they showed up. Jake was teaching Pip how to calibrate a gravity compensator when Rodriguez burst through the workshop door, not even bothering to knock. "Jake. We got a problem." The look on Rodriguez's face said everything. Jake's hand instinctively moved to Pip's shoulder. "How many?" "3. Maybe 4. They're at the station master's office right now, asking questions." Rodriguez lowered his voice. "Professional questions. The kind people don't ask unless they're looking to hurt someone." Jake's mind went into overdrive, old military training kicking in after years of rust. "Pip, go to the back room. Stay quiet." "But now." Something in Jake's tone made Pip move without arguing. Once the kid was out of sight, Jake turned to Rodriguez. "What did they ask about?" "Velrati freighters. Kids. You." Rodriguez pulled up his compad. "I grabbed some surveillance footage. You need to see this." The 3 men on the screen were professionals. Not thugs, actual trained muscle. They moved with purpose, scanning the station like they owned it. The lead guy had a scar running down his neck and the kind of eyes that had seen violence and enjoyed it. Cross syndicate. Had to be. "They know Pip's here," Jake said quietly. "Probably. Station master won't give up anyone without proper warrants, but..." Rodriguez shrugged. "These guys don't look like they care about paperwork." Jake ran calculations in his head. The station had security, but they were glorified mall cops, fined for breaking up bar fights, useless against professionals. If he called for help, it'd take hours for real authorities to arrive. Hours he didn't have. "I need you to do something," Jake said. "Name it." "Spread the word. Quietly. Patterson, Tommy from Bay 5, anyone you trust. Tell them trouble's coming to my workshop." Rodriguez's eyes widened. "Jake, you can't be thinking. I'm not letting them take that kid." For a moment, Rodriguez just stared at him. Then he nodded slowly. "Colonial Marines, right? I heard rumors you had military time." 12 years. Infantry and tactical operations." Jake started moving around the workshop, his hands automatically reaching for tools. Not repair tools. Different ones. "I really hoped I'd never need those skills again." "I'll spread the word." "But Jake." Rodriguez paused at the door. "These guys are killers." "So was I. Once." After Rodriguez left, Jake got to work. His workshop suddenly looked different through tactical eyes. The plasma welders could be repositioned. The overhead crane could block the main entrance. Fuel canisters, normally dangerous, could become strategic assets. The ventilation system could be rerouted. Within 30 minutes, his repair shop had become a defensive position. Pip emerged from the back room. "What's happening?" Jake knelt down to his level. "Remember when I said I'd stay? I meant it. But some bad people are coming, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Pip nodded, scales pale but eyes steady. "Brave kid. There's an emergency panel behind the wall in the back room. Red handle. If I tell you to run, you pull that handle and go through the maintenance tunnels. Follow the blue lights, they lead to the outer docking bays. Find Rodriguez. He'll know what to do." "But what about you?" Jake managed a smile. "I'll be right behind you. Promise." They came an hour later. Jake heard them before he saw them. boots on metal, confident and unhurried. 3 men, just like Rodriguez said. The one with the scar knocked on the workshop door. Polite. Professional. Mechanic Reed? Like to have a word. Jake opened the door but stood in the frame, blocking entry. Workshop's closed. Scar smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. We're looking for someone. Velrati kid. Heard you might know where he is. Lots of people pass through here. This one stayed. Scar's smile vanished. We're not asking for trouble, friend. Just hand over the kid, and we're gone. Not happening. The smile came back, colder this time. You sure? We're not people you want to make enemies of. Jake straightened up to his full height. Years of soft living had added some weight, but the muscle memory was still there. The way he held himself changed, less mechanic, more soldier. Here's what's going to happen, Jake said quietly. You're going to turn around and walk away. Because if you come through this door, you're not walking back out. Scar laughed. His buddies laughed. They stopped laughing when they saw what Jake had behind him. Mrs. Patterson stood there with a plasma cutter. Tommy from Bay 5 had a crowbar. Rodriguez held a welding torch. Behind them, a dozen other station workers, mechanics, dock hands, cargo haulers, stood with whatever tools they'd grabbed. He's not alone, Rodriguez said flatly. Jake had forgotten this about humans. The pack bonding thing. It wasn't just about family or blood. When one of their own took a stand, especially for something worth protecting, others stepped up. Scar's hand moved toward his jacket. Jake recognized the motion, going for a weapon. I wouldn't, Jake said. His voice carried that old command authority, the kind that saved lives by being obeyed instantly. This workshop is full of compressed fuel, plasma torches, and people who know exactly how to use them. You pull that gun, and we all find out how explosive a repair bay can be. Standoff. 4-5 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Scar stepped back. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Jake said. You go back to your bosses and tell them the kid's under human protection now. You want him, you go through proper channels. Lawyers, courts, the whole thing. Or you try this again, and I promise you, I've got friends who can make your organization very uncomfortable. Bluff. Complete bluff. But Jake sold it with every ounce of conviction he had. Scar studied him, calculating. Finally nodded. We'll be seeing you, Reed. They left. Jake waited until they were completely gone before his knees went weak. Mrs. Patterson caught his arm. You okay? Yeah. Thanks for showing up. She squeezed his shoulder. That's a good kid in there. Worth standing up for. After everyone left, Jake found Pip hiding behind the tool chest, clutching his stuffed animal. Are they gone? Pip whispered. Yeah, buddy. They're gone. But Jake knew the truth. They'd be back, with more people and fewer scruples. Time to leave Waystation Nova 9. Jake spent the next 72 hours selling everything he couldn't carry. The workshop equipment went to Rodriguez for half what it was worth. Tools, spare parts, even the beat-up couch, all of it liquidated fast. He kept only what they'd need, basic repair kit, Pip's few belongings, and 2 tickets on a transport heading deep into human-controlled space. You sure about this? Rodriguez asked, helping Jake load the last crate. That's a lot to leave behind. Jake glanced at Pip, who was carefully packing his small toolkit into a bag. Nothing here I can't replace. The kid, though. The kid was irreplaceable. They left Waystation Nova 9 on a Tuesday morning, the same day Jake's adoption paperwork cleared. Pip was legally his now. Not temporary. Not until his father returns. His. The transport was a bulk hauler, nothing fancy, but it had private quarters and didn't ask questions about passengers. Jake had booked them passage to New Providence, a colony world 4 jumps away. Far enough that the cross-syndicate's reach would be limited. Civilized enough that cross-species families were common. A place they could disappear and start over. The first jump through hyperspace hit Pip hard. Velrati didn't do well with the disorientation. Jake held him through the worst of it, rubbing circles on his back while the kid's scales went pale and clammy. It'll pass, Jake murmured. Just breathe through it. When the nausea finally faded, Pip looked up at him with those huge golden eyes. Jake? Can I ask you something? Always. Do you think Daddy's okay? Wherever he is. There it was. The question Jake had been dreading. He could have lied. Could have said something comforting and meaningless. But they were past that now. Honestly? I don't know. Maybe he made it somewhere safe. Maybe not. Jake paused, choosing his words carefully. But Pip, even if he is okay, what he did wasn't right. Parents don't leave their kids. Real parents stay. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Pip was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Jake almost missed it, "Are you my real parent now?" Jake's throat tightened. 5 years ago, he'd buried his daughter and sworn he'd never open himself up to that kind of pain again. Never let himself care that much. Never be responsible for another small life that could be taken away. And here he was, 4 jumps from anywhere he'd called home, with an alien kid who'd somehow cracked through every defense he'd built. "Yeah, buddy. I guess I am." Pip leaned against him, and Jake felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been broken for a long time, finally clicking back into place. The remaining jumps passed easier. Jake taught Pip card games using a worn deck he'd found in the transport's common room. They ate meals together in the small galley, Pip asking questions about New Providence, about what their new life would look like. "Will you still fix ships?" Pip asked. "That's the plan. Already got some leads on workshop space. Can I help?" Jake smiled. "Kid, I'm counting on it. You're getting too good with that torque wrench to waste." They arrived at New Providence on a morning when the twin suns were just breaking over the horizon. The colony was bigger than Jake expected, actual buildings instead of prefab modules, parks with real trees, markets bustling with a dozen different species. It looked like a place people built lives, not just survived. The workshop space Jake had arranged was in the industrial district. Smaller than his old place on Nova 9, but cleaner. Room for expansion. And, most importantly, it had a second floor with living quarters. 2 bedrooms. One for him. One for Pip. They spent the first week settling in. Jake registered his business license, set up the equipment, made connections with local ship captains. Pip helped with everything, his small hands already familiar with the tools, his quick mind anticipating what Jake needed. In the evenings, they'd sit on the roof of the workshop, watching ships come and go from the spaceport. Pip didn't sit at windows anymore, waiting. Didn't ask about his father. One night, about 2 weeks after they'd arrived, Pip fell asleep working on a circuit board. Jake found him slumped over the workbench, still clutching a soldering iron that had long since cooled. Jake carefully pried the tool from his hands and scooped him up. Pip was getting bigger, heavier. Growing like kids do. He mumbled something in his sleep as Jake carried him upstairs. The second bedroom had taken shape. Pip had decorated it with ship schematics torn from manuals, tools hung on the wall like art, and that worn stuffed animal sitting on the pillow. Not a guest room anymore. A kid's room. Jake tucked him in, pulling the blanket up to his chin. "Jake." Pip's eyes opened, drowsy and half aware. "Yeah? You're staying, right? Even tomorrow?" The question he'd asked 100 times in 100 different ways. Each time needing to hear the answer again, building trust one promise at a time. "Every night, buddy. I'm here every night." Pip smiled, actually smiled, and drifted back to sleep. Jake stood there for a moment, watching him breathe. This strange, brilliant kid who'd stumbled into his life and refused to let him stay broken. He thought about the future. The business they'd build together. The life they'd make. All the evenings and mornings and ordinary moments that would add up to something extraordinary. Family. Not the kind you're born into. The kind you choose. The kind you stay for. Jake turned off the light and headed downstairs. Tomorrow they had a cargo hauler coming in for repairs. Work to do. A life to live. Together.